Now let's do sort of a swipe through here on the timeline to see the playback here, and we're gonna start with this one, and this one looks super smooth. Now let's move over to the next one, and this one also looks super hold on. In today's video, we're gonna do a comparison with the 2018 model iPad Pro and the 2021 model M1 iPad Pro as well. Both are 12.9 inch, and in today's video, we're really gonna put them to the test to see which of the two iPads is the right for you. The test is gonna be quite equal to both of the devices. We're gonna do the test in Lumafusion 3.0, and both of the iPads are capped at 5 GB of RAM, where the 2018 one has 6 but capped at 5, and the M1 has 16, but 11 of them goes to the trash because it's capped at 5. So that's a waste, which is one thing. The performance of these two might be quite interesting for you to see later on in this video. So we're gonna do a couple of scrubbings through the timeline, and we also gonna do some exports. We're gonna do 3 different projects with 3 different sizes and lengths. So one is 47-ish seconds, next one is 1.5 minute-ish, and the last one is 2.47 minutes, which is the gaming video we did in the previous video as well. So without further ado, let's head over to the iPad so we can dive into these two to really test them out and to find out which one is the right for you. So here we have the two iPads side by side. We have the most powerful one here, the M1 2001 model with 1 TB of storage and 16 GB of RAM. And on the left side here we have the 2018 with 256 GB of storage and 6 GB of RAM. So this comparison is going to be a little bit more fair to both of the iPads because both of the iPads now has the Lumafusion 3.0 update. So in this comparison, we're going to do a few tests. We're going to do some render of a few projects. So we're going to start with one which is about 48 seconds long. Then we're going to do the same one which we did earlier, which was the insane gaming edit, which I made in Lumafusion. And then we're going to do the other travel edit as well. So then we will have 3 different projects with 3 different sizes. One which is about a minute, one which is 2.5 minutes, and one which is this one, which is 48 seconds. Now, even though the M1 iPad is more spec'd than the average computer, they are all limited to 5 GB of RAM usage. So both of these iPads stands equally. And that means this is a whole lot cheaper than this one. So if you get a refurbished 2018 model, you're gonna save a ton of money. Or you can go with the 2020 model or 2019 and you will still save a lot of money over the M1 iPad. Now before we go any further, let's do a live playback of these two projects here, and we're also gonna put the settings or the preview to the fastest because that is what I recommend when you do a playback, because that gives the overall smoothness playback and you prevent any lag which might occur. If we put it the best, the M1 is going to be slightly better, and this is also something that you can see in the previous comparison that I did between these two iPads. Now we're going to do this in Lumafusion 3.0, so we're going to move over and change the settings here to fastest as well. We have that on fastest. We're going to go to the beginning here and let's tap play on both of them and let's see which one is playing back the smoothest. Now, as we can see, there's not much difference between the two iPads. Doing a live playback here on the screen with the fastest previous settings applied. Now this is a fairly small project. The majority of this is sound effects, and this might change when we get over to a bigger project. Will the iPad with the M1 chip be a lot better and have a smoother playback over the 2018 model? Now let's do a render of these two projects here. Which is rendering this the fastest? Is it the M1 iPad or is it the older 2018 iPad? We're gonna go down and we're gonna change this setting here to 4K. We're gonna keep it to 150 megabits for this one, and that will leave us with a file of 672 megabytes on both devices. So we're gonna go on and just tap on export. So we can now see that the M1 was a whole lot faster than the 2018 model actually, but if we go over to settings and lower the quality to 75 megabits per second, now let's tap on render on this because this is the average video quality megabytes per second, which I also recommend. There's no point actually going up to the 150 megabits per second because of the compression and everything going on Instagram and on YouTube. So let's go on and just tap on a render here to see if there is any difference now, and if the difference is huge. So doing the export with the most common render settings of 75 up to 100 megabits per second, we could see the M1 wasn't really that much faster than the older 2018 model. Now let's move over to the next project here, which is the gaming edit. So we're gonna go with the same one as we did earlier, and this is the gaming edit 4, which is the same one we used in the previous video as well. So here we have that massive project containing, well, there's two of the same sequence stacked on top of each other with a lot of effects added to each and single clip. Now let's just go on and see if we have the preferences set to the same here, and we have them on fastest. So let's go to the beginning and do a short playback of this sequence.
Now that I'm looking back, I can see all the signs I tried to fill in the cracks that were spreading in my mind, but I was all out of hope, lost in an endless maze. The emptiness had unfolded just like a void, but you broke the coldness somehow and lit up a flame. Ooh, I was done feeling hopeless.
So both of the iPads actually played back quite well. There was a lot of glitches with the different effects, and the effects didn't look like they were supposed to do. If you want to check out the full video as well and the tutorial, if you are into gaming, there is a link down in the description below where you can check out the tutorial and also the full video without any of these glitches. But the iPads played back, well, I can't say smoothly, but they played back very well, and it wasn't that much difference between the two iPads. This is a massive project, like I said in the previous video as well, so that's one of the reasons. So let's just go to the render button here, and we're gonna see how long it takes and which one is fastest to render this 2-minute and 40-second clip here. So we're gonna go over and use the same settings as earlier here. We're gonna keep this to 75 megabits per second. We're gonna keep it at 30 FPS and also 4K. That leaves us with 1.12 gigabytes. So we're gonna go over to a render and tap on the button. Now, since I had some issues with the project that I used for the previous video when we did a render between these two iPads, I had to go for another one which was slightly bigger. This was 2 minutes and 44 seconds, and it also included a little bit more effects than the previous one. But as we can see here, the iPad with the M1 chip 2021 model isn't really that much faster than the older 2018 model. Now, it comes in about 30 seconds faster, which is not that much. Now, keep in mind that this is a fairly big project. It's 2 minutes and 44 seconds long, which is not massive, but it contains a lot of effects, which is really putting this to the test. Now, if you have an average video, an average tutorial video, a vlog, something like that, and which is about 10-15 minutes long, as long as you keep the effects low and maybe do pre-renders of certain things like lower thirds and so on, then you know, it's gonna be quite the same render speed as the M1. And the smaller your projects are, the less difference it's gonna be between the M1 and the older version, depending on what older version you have. But I think we need to, you know, test this a little bit further, so I'm gonna bring in the oldest iPad Pro 12.9 inch I have to see how fast that one is rendering compared to these two. So the older iPad Pro 12.9 inch from 2016 or 2015, can't really remember that, but anyway, it did not compare itself to the other models when it came to exporting. It took around 5 minutes and 40 seconds to export this, and I feel like, you know, this test was a complete waste of time. Anyway, if you have an older iPad, it would be highly recommended to upgrade to at least the 2018 model or newer if you're gonna edit your videos in Lumafusion and if you want to have sort of a smooth workflow as well. Now, I think there's a few more tests that we need to do. We're gonna jump over to the travel sequence, so we have put that into the testing as well, and then we basically tested a few of my sequences, and we have a conclusion later on to see which of the iPads that I can recommend if you want to save some bucks or if you want to have the best of the best. I'm gonna give you my honest opinion about the M1 at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that, and let's jump over to the travel sequence. So now we're back with the two main iPads here. We still have the 18 model on the left side and we have the M1 on the right hand side, the 21 model, and we also have the travel project open here in both of the timelines. Now, this is a typical edit that I do in Lumafusion, so this is also my reference to see which one is playing back the best. And this is containing a lot of different effects and transitions and so on, so I think we're just gonna go over and tap on play here to see if there is any major differences between these two iPads when it comes to the playback on the screen here with Lumafusion 3.0. So after taking a look at the two iPads here side by side when doing the playback, I didn't see that much of a difference. It was the same as the previous video I made where we had Lumafusion 2.4. So now both with the Lumafusion 3.0 updates, this still doesn't have the iPad OS 15, so we might do another one when that is coming. But for now, it doesn't seem like there is any major difference, not any at all if we don't count the render speed. So the export was fairly fast, like we saw in the gaming edit as well. It took about 30 seconds less for the M1 to export. Now, like I said in the previous video, it all comes down to when you export your video, upload your video to YouTube, and the YouTube compression might put the two iPads down to the same time limit. So that means it could take this exact same amount of time from you export your video in Lumafusion to the video is ready to be published on YouTube. So for me, the export time between these two isn't really that significant. And if we go down to a project which is less complex and a smaller project, the render and export time is basically the same. So for me, the 2018 iPad with 256GB or 1TB depending on your needs with 6GB of RAM is still worth getting over the M1 iPad. Now, when it comes to the scrubbing of the screen here and of the timeline, if we just do a few scrubbings again, we can still see that the iPad M1 is smooth, but it is a little bit jumpy as well because of the effects added. You will have to scroll through fairly slow to get the most out of that type of workflow if you scrub a lot through your videos and your sequences and clips and all of that. So once we get the pace up here a little bit, we're gonna have that lag anyway. And it's the same with the 2018 model. If we zoom in a little bit here, if we do a slow scrub through, it's gonna be smooth no matter what. But if we pick up the pace, it's actually a little bit cleaner. Wow. Interesting. So if we go to the beginning here and we do now a fresh sort of a swipe through the timeline here, like that, and we do the same with this. Interesting. Very, very interesting. This is the M1. And it doesn't pick up on the clips at all. Going over to the 2018 one. I don't know what to say. Interesting. Now, this was something that I did not expect at all. The iPad M1 having worse playback scrubbing than the 2018 model. I checked the project and I also checked the settings on both devices. Both devices had the same settings and the project was intact. So I had to come up with another idea to see if it was my finger that wasn't accurate enough on both of the devices. So I built myself my own Apple Pencil iPad scrubber. So now we will have a more accurate reading on both of the devices using my well-designed Apple Pencil iPad scrubber. And to be honest, I don't see much of a difference between the two iPads. It must have been my inaccurate finger scrubbing through the two iPads, or it must have been the iPads being too warm. So the footage you're seeing right now is when the iPads had been cooled down for a few hours, and yeah, they look exactly the same when they do a playback and when you do the scrubbing. But you can't really pick one or the other if you're going to compare the scrubbing with your finger, because the proof is here. It's exactly the same on both devices. A few hiccups on the M1 and a few hiccups on the 2018 model. So these are completely the same with Lumafusion 3.0. So let's wait until we get the iPadOS 15. We're going to do another test and see if there is actually any improvements that has, you know, popped up during that update, to see if the M1 gets even better. And I'm also excited to check out the new multitasking feature to see if we can implement that into our Lumafusion workflow when we download music, when we use different things like importing from our Photos app or using external drive and so on. So that was a really interesting comparison test with the two iPads here. The 2018 model really kept up with the M1, and to be honest, there wasn't that much difference, only when it was the render or the export process. So the longer the video is with more effects, the more you're gonna get out of the M1 iPad. So shorter clips with less effects, choose another iPad than the M1. And since we have the cap of 5 GB, you might as well just get an older one, and then later when there's no cap, get the newest iPad then, and then just sell the one that you have. The 2018, 19, 20 should be more than enough, and since these are also a lot cheaper than the M1, that would be my go-to for these two iPads. And since it's cheaper, you can use that extra cash to get something like an SSD disk. The only downside with the older iPads is that you don't have the Thunderbolt connection, so you're not gonna have that super fast speed. But the Samsung T5, T7, because of the optimization with the iPads and Lumafusion, of course, the speed is going to be lightning fast anyway. And I have no issues with the Samsung T5 at all. If I'm gonna upgrade, I'm gonna go for the T7. Don't need the X5. It's way too expensive, and it doesn't work on my PC because I don't have the Thunderbolt. So in case I have, transferring files and so on, it's better to have something that works with everything you have. So a Samsung T5, T7 is also my recommendation if you are looking for an SSD disk. So what do you think of the comparison? Which iPad are you going for, and have you already ordered the M1, or are you playing around with the M1 already? Let me know down in the comment section below. And if you're new to this channel, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, that would be really appreciated. And with that said, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I see you in the next one.